Mike Cannon-Brookes from Atlassian.
Thanks, champion. All right, so this is going to be super interesting. I've got no speaker notes. I got a presentation I wrote this morning. Let me see. I was asked by Nick, I got 15 minutes, right? Yep. Okay, 15 minutes to tell you about the early days and early lessons and everything else. So what I thought would be interesting is every slide in this deck that's not one massive color or a photo is from an old deck. So what I started with is took all these decks that were like in Dropbox in 2008, 2006, 2005, and put them all together, and hopefully I can weave a story through it in real time. So it'll be fun. We're missing the font, but that's all right. Don't question my font choices. It's not supposed to look like that. So I thought I'd boil it all down with 4 critical decisions that I think if we'd made them differently in our first 5 or 6 years, we probably would have ended up in a different spot, and then try to put some color, and Nikki insisted I put lots of old photos, so there's lots of embarrassing photos in there. Apologies for that. I'd like to start with this one. There's actually a work photo. This is pretty much what the startup journey looks like for me, which is you start off on the side of the boat, on the side of the river. This is a bunch of our team members looking at this boat, thinking this is going to be really awesome, and then most of the journey you spent hanging on for dear life. But it's a lot of fun, but it could end badly at any time. So if I had one photo to justify the journey, that would be it. I think that's from 2006. So first decision we had, which is a bit of a trite one for Atlassian, is we chose a scalable model, and that made a huge difference. That was a huge decision that we put far too little time and energy into thinking about at the time, and has proven to be one of the most successful things. So AKA, how did we come up with the Atlassian engine? This is where we get into super old slides. Again, don't judge my slide quality. This is 2003 era kind of stuff. Nice black bullet points. So we started early. I wrote this book. You can still get it on Amazon if you really want. It's kind of crap. We didn't have any money, and we had a couple of credit cards. We knew we wanted to make software, and how hard could that be? So we needed to change things. How are we different in software from a traditional enterprise software company? Well, that's where the decisions come from. So the decision for us was quite easy in the end of the day. We didn't have any money, so we couldn't hire any salespeople, right? So the Atlassian engine is all about not having any salespeople. How did that come about? Well, basically, we didn't have any money. So we decided that software had to sell itself. It wasn't so much a decision as we were forced into it. Some of the best decisions you're actually forced into. If we had to sell itself, it had to be cheap. People aren't going to go and spend 100 grand on the internet. They actually are, but in those days they weren't. If we were going to sell it at low dollars, if we wanted to build a real business and make any money, we had to sell a shitload of it, right? Thousands of copies, so that kind of came from the start. And if we had to sell thousands of copies, we had to sell it globally, which meant we had to be global from day one. And this sort of all summed up as the fact that the customer doesn't buy our stuff, or the customer does buy our stuff, sorry, we don't sell it, which is kind of the evolution of where the Atlassian no salespeople kind of thing came from, was a decision early that if all these things held true, therefore we needed to sell low-priced, highly affordable, global from day one kind of software, which came about really well. As a part of that, we had our goal to have 50,000 customers. This was a very big decision for us because saying we had 50,000 customers meant every time we went to a trade show and we got 20 leads, we'd look at each other and go, 20 leads is not going to move the needle here if we're trying to aim for 50,000. Again, follow the decision tree beforehand. And actually, that was a really big instructive goal because every decision we've made along the way has been about massive scale because on day 1, day 2, day 5, and which are very early in the piece, we chose this massive, massive goal of 50,000 customers. Now, the funny thing about why we chose 50,000 customers is at the time we thought $100 million was the biggest business we could possibly imagine. And we thought we could probably get about $2,000 per customer, and so we did the maths very simply and came up with 50,000 because that was a $100 million business. Ironically, today, that's right. So we just actually passed 40,000 customers 12 years in. So we haven't even reached the 50,000, but we've clearly passed the $100 million mark, so our maths was a little bit off there. Point of the decision was that we focused on scale. How to do 4 minutes? Okay, 4 decisions, 4 minutes each. I'm almost going to get to 15. Second key decision is building a second product. This is probably one of the most instructive decisions that Atlassian ever made and was a little bit of a fight, and probably the reason why we're not a division of IBM as we speak. So we had this product called Jira. This is an awesome website screenshot. We were really great at CSS. Actually, there was no CSS back here. We were good at making tables look pretty well, and this is from Jira 1.4, and some old screenshots. It looked really awesome as well. 2002, we actually won an award for the design of Jira back in 2003. It was a different world of design then. Look at these sexy buttons we got going on here. So, and this was an email. I don't know why I included this slide. Oh, that's right. One of the first things to a mate asked for a free copy, and I said no discounts. Very early on, no discounts. That was good. So 2002, here's a slide of Jira. It looks a little better. We needed it, we couldn't build it, etc. That was where Jira came from. 2004, we released, but 2003, we started building our second product called Confluence. Why is this an instructive decision? It looks a lot better than this nowadays. I actually think I have an even sexier screenshot. Look at that. Awesome. The crux of that decision for Atlassian was building a second product meant we had to get good at everything in the business. A lot of technology companies only actually build one product, which means that company belongs better as part of somebody else's company because they've got a big sales force, they've got other things they can sell alongside of, etc. When we moved from having one product to two products, why was that controversial internally? We had Jira. Jira was going quite well by all accounts. We had, I think, 8, 10 maybe people working in the business. We had a list of things people were asking for, like really it'd be good if Jira had comments and attachments and some fancy technology, things like that. And when we were building that, we said, we're going to start something else, and all these people looked at us internally and said, that's nuts. We have a product that's going really well, and we have a lot of things people want. Why don't we go build those things? And we made the decision to start a second thing. What did that force us to do? That forced us to think about how do we market technology? Not market Jira, but market technology. How do we build a company that can build products and product management and all the design thing, all the different aspects that have led from that to here. This was about saying early products suck and that's okay. So here's our first website. Actually, this is the earliest screenshot I could possibly find. We weren't even making software, we were supporting software. This was pretty early on then where Jira 1.0 was released, so you can see this here. 02-ish. And then the website got a little better as we had Jira 1.2, and then eventually it got better at some point where we added Confluence and some dev tools. I couldn't find one with just Jira and Confluence on, and where you can look at it now, it looks a lot better. But the point of the history lesson here, again, these are all slides from previous decks, so if they don't string through, that's my vocal problem. Here you see a lot of different slides, right, where there's Jira, Confluence, Bamboo, Crowd, Crucible, blah, 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 blah. So now we have, I don't know, 12, 15, 16 products. If we hadn't gone from 1 to 2, we would never have gone to 15. We would have had one product. Jira probably would still be in a phenomenon that it is today, but it probably would have been sold because it made more logical sense to be part of someone else's stable. We as an organization would never have had to get good at selling products, software products globally in the generic sense. You can also see some funny numbers from, this is 2009, so about 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. Offices, we had 4 at the time, etc. So today, as I said, we have 15 products, etc. We never would have done that if we didn't have made the decision to go from 1 to 2 products in the first place. How do we go on that one? Ooh, getting about 3 minutes. Right, so writing down our values. This is an interesting one about really scaling founders and culture. Right? And if we hadn't done that, we would have failed long ago, because when you scale an organization, when you're growing really fast, scaling is not just AWS as we talked about beforehand. Scaling is as much scaling yourselves as individuals, as founders. Presumably by the time you're scaling, you've gotten through some level of success. Now you're going to hire a bunch of people. How are those people going to have the same success you've had early when you're not actually writing at the keyboard yourself? That comes down to scaling founders, scaling the culture, etc. When we started, I'm very famous on record as saying, if you talked to me about values when I started the company, we would have said, it's bunkus, let's go make some awesome products and go, build things for customers. The more you get into it, the more you realize values are actually super important because they're your ethos. So we did this exercise. This is some original screenshots or photos of the exercise. Did an exercise where the whole point of the exercise was not writing down values that we aspired to, not writing down basic human values. So you notice none of our values are about honesty or integrity. To me, that's a basic human value. That shouldn't be a corporate value. That's a basic, you don't get hired if you don't have that value kind of thing, and I shouldn't have to write on a wall that you should be honest. So we did this exercise about what we didn't want to lose about the company. We did it with management, we did it with staff, and we came up with this almost equal. So I don't know which paper is which, but you can see they're actually pretty close. And then we came up with the Atlassian values. Here's one slide where I put them down. They're kind of famous now, but we tend to live them every day, and it's really important. Here's a different slide further on a couple of years where we now had some designer do some pretty pictures of the different values. And then they come out in different things like in our events, people get really into them, and it's all about building a company that cares about each other, playing as a team. We like to build human pyramids, and be the change you seek. The Atlassian Foundation is very important to us, doing a lot of different change and good in the world, from Room to Read to helping kids to write code to bush regeneration out west of Sydney there. So we do a lot of that. And when we talk about scaling the founders, we started off like this. This is an old slide. I thought this was just amusing because I don't actually remember this animation, but digging through all these old presentations was kind of fun. I was digging through Dropboxes and all sorts of old stuff. So we started with 2 people. We got a little older, it looks like this. I can't actually remember when this was. But you know, this is at one of our early company picnics. I think there was about 20 people there. This is sort of going through a list of photos. This is one of our early Christmas things where we went and shot actually on Sydney Harbour, laser clay pigeon shooting. We probably had about 25 people. This is one of our 3rd or 4th Melbourne Cups. Actually, there's about 20 people here. 9 of these people still work for Atlassian, so it was kind of cool. Most of them have better haircuts now. We look better than these guys did. It's funny when you look back at early photos of almost all these companies. So to Nikki's point that every company starts off kind of crap, who would have thought these guys built the best technology company in the world? So then we get into shipments and other things. So there's probably about 30, 40 people at this point. Interestingly, this table you'll see pop up in a few screenshots. So this table here was our original piece of furniture. So when we moved out of the internet.com Jupiter Media offices into our first office, we had this one table and that was it. So 6 of us actually, all the computers, everything sat on that one table, power strips underneath, horribly unsafe, and the table never actually broke, although it went kind of like this as you had more and more computers on it. We still have it somewhere around. This is an example of our first San Francisco office. We then branched overseas. So these 2 guys built everything, first 2 San Francisco employees by hand. Desks everything. Melbourne Cup gets a little bigger, and then gets a little bigger. And this is actually from, that's 5 years ago. So nowadays the Melbourne Cup photo would look ridiculous if I couldn't find it. Early chart from an old presentation of staff. Interesting to see in April 2008, we had about 160 staff. By April 2015, we'll have about 10 times that. Not quite, 8 or 9 times that. So it's kept going. We used to hire people en masse, so I thought this was amusing where we decided to scale culture and scale the founders, so back to the decision, that's why we did that. 32 engineers we tried to hire. This was a massive, massive campaign from us. This was like hiring another 1/3 of the company. It was huge. The same culture, the same values that we had back then we have now. We have 32 engineers in about 2 weeks at the moment. And why did we scale up? Well, this is an example. Matt actually gave a fascinating point beforehand talking about their website chart, how it North America, etc. This was one of the reasons we need to scale the company. So green is where we have more staff than cases. So when support cases come in 24 hours a day, we had tons of people sitting around in Sydney going, wow, this support thing's easy. And then the problem is, of course, as Europe, and then specifically Europe and the East Coast of the United States comes on board, all our people are asleep and the support cases spike and we had a problem. So that's why we had to, we're really into support. That's why we went into building offices. And we have a lot of offices, so I found this random slide where 2 guys and girls in 5 garages. We've also got a lot better at Keynote since then. But that's also another original photo of our San Francisco office when it started. This is the Sydney office when it was a couple of couches. Many a night has been slept on these couches by tired engineers, people doing ship it, etc. They actually fold together. There's that famous table again, by the way. So the point there about scaling offices I wanted to make is one of the decisions we did in terms of scaling company culture, etc., is getting out of things when we got early. We went to New York. It was a mistake in 2005. We went in with the view that going to the US would make a difference to the business. We had 1,500 customers at the time, and everyone told us we should be in the US, we should be in the US, we should be in the US. We had nobody outside Australia, and being in the US did make a difference. We hired a different type of people. We could get the communication loops of people emailing us. It wasn't 8 hours and then we'd reply and then another 8 hours and a day goes past for one loop. We could do that in real time. New York was a mistake, so we got out quickly and moved to San Francisco. When I say quickly, it was about 9 to 12 months. Why was it a mistake? Because we couldn't hire the people. We couldn't get the people we needed. Then Amsterdam came along for Europe, KL, Dansk, which is a whole separate story, but that's 15 minutes by itself. This is the old San Francisco office. This is the old Sydney office. These are all sub 2008, 2009, which when I say old, sorry, that is the actual original building. That's the same office we were in on the Corn Exchange when there was no Cockle Bay, Darling Harbour area. It was straight down to the wharf, but the boats used to pull up there. Today we have, I don't know, 7 to 10 offices, depending on how you count them around the world, and that support graph looks a lot better. So there, and the last thing I want to leave you with a decision, which we made very early, and I'm running out of time, is believing in the blue ocean. We've always been huge believers that the world is a massive, massive, massive place, and there is scale to be had everywhere, and that really comes down to the world's bigger than you think, but that comes down to marketing. Like, you have to be marketing all day, every day. We decided this very early, that we had to make a lot of noise in some way for someone to hear us somewhere in the world, right? And too many people think if I build a really good product and I just put it out there, then people will beat down my door. And the more you realize, the more you go on, is no one has any idea who you are. There are millions and millions and billions of people who have no idea who Atlassian is nowadays. You all think, wow, it's this big company. I've heard about it. It was in the paper. I'm worried about the billions of people who have no idea who we are and still think we're a tiny portion of where we need to be. So talking about marketing, key decision when we gave away our software to open source for free. It was kind of a nice little early bump for us. Some people ran it online. Other engineers would find out about it, use it, come try it in their businesses, and it worked quite well. Again, one of these decisions, to Nikki's point about you don't really know what you do, we didn't think about this very hard. It wasn't like we did a spreadsheet analysis of if we gave it away for free, we'll lose this much money. We just said, sounds like a good idea. You know, they're not going to pay for it anyway, let's give it to them. Same with non-profits. It was a very small decision in the early days. We just gave it to free to non-profits. Still is now. We have 25,000 some non-profits around the world. Intellectual property is an interesting one. So in the early days, we gave away our source code. We're not open source, but you get the source code with any commercial license. A lot of people would say, hey, people are going to steal your source code and then they're going to run it. They're going to build clones and copies. You know, Jira's, I don't know, 20 million lines of code or something. They're not just going to steal it and run their own copy and no one's going to notice. It doesn't happen. However, it made two things happen. One is the customers said, well, I have the source code, so if this tiny Australian company goes bankrupt, you know, I can run it myself. I can change it. So they give them some confidence. And secondly, they showed we had nothing to hide, and it made a big difference. And people hacked all over our system. So people built plugins and extensions and stuff before we even had a plugin system, which gave us, again, a little bit of marketing boost. Marketing, this is a good idea, running out of time. So we ran this campaign, 5 users for $5 for 5 days, to see if we could give away our software to tiny teams. Why did we do that? We don't really do well at tiny teams, or we didn't back then. Jira did well, about 25 people above, you have a problem. 2 people, you don't have Jira, you have a whiteboard. Somewhere in the middle, there's a point where it's non-economic for us to be. So we said, why don't we try this? We tried it for 5 days. Was massively successful. We raised over 100 grand. We're aiming for 25. I don't know why this is. Anyway, it's now permanent. So now permanently we have 10 users for $10, and we believe hugely in the scale at the bottom of the pyramid. When we have 40,000 customers, that's 40,000 customers. That is a single domain name that pays us more than $10. There's hundreds of thousands of customers by other people's definitions under the 10 user level that we don't even count. You can think about that as a massive marketing funnel because we believe in the size of the ocean that we're trying to run into. Here's some early marketing screenshots. So this is Scott and I in Belgium. Well, he's probably taking the photo. We had a couple laptops and we borrowed all sorts of stuff. We did all sorts of hijinks at conferences to get our names known. I pulled out one here, which is about buying beer. So what we did in this case, it was a conference largely like this, or a little bit bigger. We had a friend who was the speaker. We asked him if we could give beer to his audience. He went, I don't care. As long as the conference organizers say it's fine. So we didn't ask the conference organizers. We went to the local bottle shop in Belgium because we weren't sponsoring the conference. We bought 300-400 bottles of beer. You can see at the top here, we slapped the stickers on and we gave them to all the attendees. Actually, before that, we couldn't cool all this beer, so what we did is we parked it outside in Belgium in December. We just lowered the windows of the rental car and thought if they steal a rental car full of beer, well, we're out of luck. But they didn't. The beer got really cool. And then we slapped these stickers on as people walked into the auditorium. We got about 3/4 of the auditorium of beer. It was like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon before someone kind of shut us down. But it was awesome. It was a huge marketing stunt. It got us tons of people. Again, the belief in we had to get our name known somehow, and we still do this sort of stuff. We do it a little bit more legally nowadays. Ship something tangible. Oh yeah, market with t-shirts. So this is an old slide I found of some of the t-shirts we've made. These are sort of t-shirts we made in the very early days. Now it looks very different. Sometimes our marketing's too clever. We put this for Atlas Campus, our developer conference. This is one of the early screenshots of that, 2009. And if you actually put these characters, this binary into your thing, it's a bit.ly URL that gave you a free ticket. We thought it'd be awesome. No one ever gave a free ticket. No one figured that out. Anyway, years later, people are like, man, I could have saved $200. What did that result in? Again, you can see the customer growth. So we constantly based in believing the world is much bigger than we actually are. And I think that's where people, especially Australians, were bad. We think this is how big the world is. When we had 1,000 customers, we could have sat there and gone, man, we have, look, 1,000 customers. That's awesome, right? We're at 40,000 now, and we still think we're a tiny fraction of where we could be. There's an old slide, just more of customers. I thought this was really amusing, so I found this old email. We're big on metrics and reporting. This is 2004. We just had our second best week ever. which was $111,000 a week, which was pretty huge, almost $5 million run rate. It's pretty kick-ass. But to the point earlier about Confluence, Confluence had just passed 20% of total sales. So it was 20K that week as opposed to 2%. And then this was our very sexy and technical reporting system we had back then that I think was manually put together. We've always been super into metrics and we do all these sorts of things. Dashboards nowadays, we're very advanced about it, but tracking metrics, that was not important. This was kind of nice, the first $1 million week. So the first time we passed $1 million in a week, we printed everybody t-shirts and thought it was really huge. You can see this is an evolution of our dashboard down the bottom here. It got more fancy with week, month, quarter, and all sorts of different things up and down the side here. Now for reference, if we do under $1 million day, it's kind of a disappointing day for us often. And we have multiple $2 million days now. That's sort of our new benchmark. So, you know, life just moves on, right? But you celebrate each benchmark along the way. We've sold a lot of stuff. This is a fascinating early picture. So here you can see Scott versus my code with different names we had. So this is me, and then it goes down, and Scott's just goes up and down, which you can see that AI write code faster than he does by miles, but his tends to stick around longer because mine tends to get removed. To the point of being shitty, there's a joke at Atlassian about founder code. Every time someone finds it and removes it, it kind of goes around, everyone cheers, and you know, we remove some more founder code. All the crappy code that we wrote, the two things we did well is one, we wrote crappy code that got us to the next phase to hire some people to keep going, which, yep, it was rubbish. I'll admit, I'm not the best engineer in the world, but we got to the next year, we got to the next month, and that was what was most important. And secondly, we hired way better engineers, and we knew we were bad at being engineers, and we hired really smart people to go and remove our code over time. I don't know what I was going to say today. Things are bigger than that, and that was my quick 15 minutes with apologies for the huge fonts. How did I do? Ooh, not too bad.
You want to sit at the bar?
What's that?
Want to sit at the bar? Grab a seat.
Oh, look at this bar.
I'll ask you some difficult questions.
Sure.
So I'm going to start with a little bit about this sort of salesperson-like light model and bottom-up selling, which you guys pioneered, really. Was there anyone else doing it at the time you were doing it in the enterprise space?
No, not at all. But I mean, you got to remember when we started, software was distributed on discs and DVD, CDs, and they were emailed out. Someone would come and give you a demo in person, that sort of stuff. You couldn't just download it off a website. That was kind of radical. Now SaaS, it's a different world, right? Yeah,
and you know, it's still pretty rare because Nikki, did you see that Twitter back and forth Nikki had with Mark Andreessen on bottom-up selling, where he reckoned it just couldn't be done.
Yep.
And he used you guys as an example.
Yep. People still think what we do can't be done. So, and what's funny is the doubters, and again, it's maybe a good lesson for those people out there who believe in what they're doing over what other people think. You know what you're doing way better than they are. They're just offering drive-by advice. But at almost every single point along the way, people told us we needed salespeople to get to the next X. $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it is. Eventually, they gave up on saying that, but we ignored them almost all the way through because we knew about the power of what we were doing. And then the second part there, which is really interesting, is now people pigeonhole us and say, well, it's only because they sell to technical people that they can do this, right? Whereas now, you know, we just had our user conference last week, and I think 18 to 20% of the audience were developers. So we had, you know, 80% of the audience that wasn't technical, and we sell in exactly the same way. So
just tell us about the first sale of Jira, the first bit of revenue you got in. Can you remember who that was to and the process around it? Was it someone who found you off a website, or was that more of a handheld?
The first initial sales were all to friends.
Yeah.
Different friends we had around the world in different companies. It was largely London and Stockholm were our two biggest cities in the early days for just random reasons because we knew a bunch of Swedes and we knew some English people. But yeah, I mean, they bought it. Early instructive sales, we had a friend of mine, Hani, who bought 5 copies. He convinced his boss to buy 5 copies. It was $800 a copy, which gave us $4,000 in the bank. And we used that to go to San Francisco, buy airfares and tickets to a conference called Java One, which was huge, and probably sold more than 4 copies by being there. I think he only ever used 1 or 2, so a lot of the early guys were just friends that helped us out.
Yeah, yeah. What were some of the core, like what were some of the biggest user acquisition moments in the early, say, first year of Jira being around? And do you have a feeling for what they were and how you guys came up with them?
In the first few years, it was all about, I mean, we would just market in communities. We do what now is called content marketing. We would write blogs, and we would, you know, go to communities and forums and be helpful and put our signature on the bottom of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We would do that kind of marketing. But that's all executional decisions. That was like one customers. The biggest inflection decisions. So I tend to separate decisions. There's execution decisions, which you need to do really, really well constantly. That mean you keep growing at a constant rate. But then you also have to make inflecting decisions or step change decisions that mean that this chart goes like this and then keeps growing at a different rate with the execution decisions, right? And you make very few inflection decisions. And yeah, I mean, like the $10 for 10 users was a huge decision for us. We radically changed the pricing model at the bottom and gave away, at the time we gave away about 5% of Jira revenue, which is pretty, if you're just going to give away 5% of a company revenue, it's quite a big decision. Again, if we'd had a board and other people, maybe they would have said we shouldn't have done that. But if you look, the long-term 3, 4, 5-year payback of that was huge because we got tens of thousands of copies of Jira out there, and some of those teams grew from 10 to 11 people, and then had to pay us $800 or whatever it was.
The other thing, and you know it from Blackbird's like really focused on this idea of global day one, and we see so many Aussie founders who come to us, and particularly in the enterprise space, they've got a network in Australia, right? And they're like, well, I'm going to sell to these 10 people in Australia. I'm going to nail the Australian market first, and then I'm going to think about going overseas. And a lot of the wisdom from some of the people, perhaps advisors in the startup community, investors, is get Australia right, nail it before you even think about going overseas. What's your view on that?
People still say that? I don't know. I think you have to be. I mean, it depends what type of company you want to build. There's plenty of companies that have been built in Australia that are Australian only. There should be a reason for Australian defensibility. I mean, the Seek, REA, car sales, etc. The sort of marketplace businesses are classic examples where they've got Australian defensibility, and some of them have done better at going overseas than not. But if you're starting a pure technology play where your competitors are worldwide, then you're going to get crushed if you start in Australia. Like you're just not going to be able to do it. So you have to think about being global from day one. And with things like we're talking about AWS and the internet and everything else nowadays, it's way easier to do that. I mean, the app stores are phenomenal. The fact that you can put up an app in the app store and have it live in, 100 different countries, immediately is. 10 years ago, we didn't have anything like that. We put up a website and people would have to, get the URL right to get to it and stuff like that. So, I think you need to be global if you want to build a really, big business.
Yeah. So moving on to your second point, which is about Confluence and the decision to do that, and it was awesome to hear how that was more than just a product decision. There's sort of, there's rumors that you and Scott had sort of different ways of thinking about that. Did you guys, what was the argument there or the debate?
Yeah, we've always had, I don't remember with the Confluence decision particularly we debated. I mean, we've debated certain things, and usually with us, if we can't convince the other person it's a good idea, we don't do it. So the default position is actually lack of action, which is okay. But usually what happens is either we let something drop, or one of the people is passionate about it that they keep bringing it up and eventually convince the other person it's a good idea. And we've had a number of those that have taken us 6 months to kind of get to agreement. But that's okay. In a way, it's good to have that person, being a screen for the decision. So Confluence was not had that. We were using a number of internal wikis at the time, and they were all kind of rubbish, and we knew we could build a better one. We didn't know people would buy it, but we didn't know people would buy Jira either, so we just thought we could do better.
Great. Let's go. I know we've only got 5 or 6 minutes. Let's go to some of these. When did you accept investment and why? And I'll add on a little bit to that. In the early days, I think you had a few offers or perhaps some term sheets.
Tons.
And what made you say no then, and what made you say yes to the Accel round that you guys took?
Yeah, I mean, it's a longish story, but I mean, yeah, we had lots of investment. As soon as we started to get some measure of success, then people start chasing you, and hopefully you all experience that. What we were strong on is saying we didn't need it to get to this point, so why would we raise capital now? If we could get it in 6 months or 12 months, let's get it later. And we built a model and a business that fundamentally monthly brought in more money than we spent. And we were aggressive about spending almost every dollar that we brought in, investing in ourselves and taking risks, and continue to do that. But we never needed the money, so we didn't go and get any. A lot of businesses nowadays, it's not quite that easy. We were in a lucky period as well. And so, yeah, we had a lot of people chasing us. And what we did over time is meet the best ones, and we had a bunch of coffees. And we were very open and ethical about the coffees. So, look, we're absolutely not interested in raising money, but I'd love to pick your brain about X. And usually they're like, oh, I'd love to have coffee with you and tell you about X. And you'd get all this free knowledge and be sweet. And they'd say, do you want your money? Nope, I don't. Thanks for the knowledge. And we'd move on. And we did that for years. And when we eventually decided to raise money, we were 7, 8 years in. I've told the story a lot of times. We looked at the next 8 years and thought we needed help. So we went to 5 firms and raised money. again, the complicated thing with us is we've never actually taken external capital onto the balance sheet. So the first capital raise we did went to the founders, and then the recent capital raise we did, well, it's not a capital raise, the recent investment, I guess. The first round was founders selling shares to Excel, and then the second round we did earlier this year was employees selling shares to Tiro and other people. So we haven't actually taken kind of institutional capital onto the balance sheet. Yeah, so we're very non-traditional. Don't copy us. It's not a good idea.
Okay, next one at the top is, someone wants a job, do you prefer to hire people via networking or normal job applications?
Do I prefer to hire people via networking or normal job applications?
I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Either. I'll take anywhere.
Either.
Yeah, sure. If people are good, they stand out, we'll hire them. So
I want to ask one question. It's about product-centric founders, and I know you and Scott were super sort of all over the product for a long time, but now you've got 17, 16 products. Are you still all over it? Is that still a core part of your day?
Yep. I think you should be, as a founder, as a leader of a business, you should be all over whatever it is that's a core differentiator. We are a product company through and through. Like we have to do marketing well, we have to do talent well, we have to do all these other things well. The last thing that we could afford to do badly is shipping product, because we have no salespeople, because we have, the automation of the model means if our product starts to suck, the whole thing falls over. Yeah. So we spend an inordinate amount of time on product for that reason, right? Yeah. We have to.
And UX, UI, super important?
Absolutely. Yep. And even more, getting more so every year. Design is one of the few fundamental differentiators, and I believe for the next 5 years at least, if not more, it's hard to see beyond that, it will continue to be so because it's very hard to scale. Like if we're talking earlier about technology as a differentiator, everyone can buy AWS instances, so you can theoretically kind of scale as not a differentiator anymore. It's very hard for everyone to hire designers. That's why their price is going up and up and up.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, can we see a raise of hands of everyone in the audience who uses your software, uses Atlassian software? It's pretty good. Good. That was quick. I don't know where to start on this one. What's the best way to build great company culture? Give us one. Just give us one tip.
It's just hard.
Is it
I mean, you don't build values? Culture. Culture is the sum of the people that you have inside the building, right? And so hiring the right people is the fundamental way that starts, and then give them an environment where that can foster and breed in a positive way, and make sure that they understand that they are the champions of the culture, and that when they're hiring people, they should do the same thing. They should hire people that they want to work with, that they're passionate about bringing into the business, etc. And then you have to kind of let go, and it goes for itself after that. Cool. So there's no, you can't start culture, you can't create it. It's the people who are there. And I guess ultimately, if that's the case, it comes back to the founders. They have to be nice.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm going to ask you one more question. I know you've got to get on a plane after that. I want to ask you the difference between starting a company when you started it in Australia and starting a company now in Australia, a tech business, internet style of business. And I'm not talking about, cost of building software, cost of building, cost of servers and all that stuff. I'm talking about the Australian tech community and ecosystem and how that's changed, and, how different do you think it is?
Yeah, I was asked this outside. I mean, we have a way better ecosystem all up and down every which way than we had even 3 years ago, right? Yeah. And if you talk about 10 years ago, it was totally different. I mean, a lot of these companies that we now know well, the founders of, that have done well, the names you'd recognize, a lot of us started 8, 10, 12 years ago. We didn't know each other was there. There was no way to meet these other people. And so we were kind of toiling away in our little basement. They were toiling away in their little basement, et cetera. And some point over the years, you met them, and 10 years later, you're looking around going, wow, we somehow survived this journey together. And so nowadays with the community, with everything else, events like this, it's a totally different place. I think we have a lot more experience here than we had back then as well, in terms of each different level of the ecosystem, from people who've started a number of failed businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. So they've got some scars from doing that, to people who are building, iconic technology names, and we have a number of those now. That's the healthiest thing about the ecosystem that I see nowadays.
And one other thing that I guess I like emphasizing is that Silicon Valley, sort of the access into Silicon Valley now and all the learnings from there is very different now than what it was 5 or so years ago, where you really had to go over there. Now you can really learn a lot about it.
You can certainly read a lot online, and you can learn a lot online, and absolutely everything else. I mean, I always encourage people to go there and kind of experience it. I don't think you necessarily need to move there, but I think you need to understand it, and some of that understanding only comes from being on the ground and walking around, and the stuff we do with the StartMate guys, right? They come back, but they're about 3 inches taller because they're like, actually, the guys over there know better than me.
Yeah.
But I understand how that whole ecosystem works, so I can kind of play in there, but I also know that I can compete with that. I can be, an equal, and then they're more confident about that. So, absolutely, you can learn a ton online nowadays, right? We used to buy books. Like, you go downstairs into my basement, it's hilarious because I've got almost every business technology book produced between about 99 and 2004 or whatever, when you used to actually go and buy books at airports, etc. And I have stacks and stacks and stacks of them, and all the old classics. Some of which are still very relevant today, right? That's the other thing, is our industry moves really fast and technology changes. A lot of the lessons in those old books are actually really, really good. Yeah. They may not be phrased in, lean startup manifesto kind of BS, but at the same time, they all do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, a lot of that's very similar stuff. It just doesn't have as much marketing branding around it, but the good companies did very similar things back then. Slower, different pace, different technology structure. They weren't putting mobile apps on the App Store, right? But whatever they were doing similar moves.
One of the other purposes today is to really get everyone to know about StartMate and get people applying to StartMate. Do you have any last words to stay on StartMate?
That's awesome. Great. It's a great thing. I've been involved since the start, mate. And not getting a job as a
an old one.
And it's just a great program. I think from all the mentor point of view, it feels like every year, and I don't mean this in a negative way, taking kids and we send out men. Like, it's this weird thing where they get such confidence through the program about all the things they do and their ability to build a business, and whether their actual company succeeds or not. It's fascinating just to see the change in attitude through all these people. So as and a lot of the mentors talk about that from a giving back side. You're kind of just giving people some confidence, and then that in 10 years' time they'll go off and do amazing things. Whether or not it's the StartMate business is a different thing. But it's a phenomenal program. You get to hang out with me a bit more. Sorry about that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's been fantastic. Thanks for
guys.
coming.